The lights of the Capitol studio were blinding, the cameras already rolling. It was a panel discussion on national security, but things were about to veer wildly off script. Representative Jasmine Crockett sat calm and composed at the table, her notes neatly stacked in front of her. Across from her was former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, his trademark confidence on full display. He leaned back in his chair, flashing that familiar half-smirk he reserved for moments he believed he was in control. The host posed a standard question about government transparency. Crockett leaned forward, adjusted her mic, and spoke carefully. "I think the American people deserve to know what's really happening behind closed doors," she began. "And speaking of transparency, Mr. Pompeo, would you like to explain this?" She reached down, pulled out a printed sheet of paper, and held it up for the cameras to zoom in. The room fell silent. Pompeo's eyes narrowed. "I'm holding an internal email, sent from your private account, during your tenure at the State Department. It mentions something quite disturbing, a conversation about quietly redirecting funds to what you called a shadow channel for foreign operations." The host froze. The panelists stiffened. "And Pompeo?" He blinked, just once, and then shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. "That email. I'm not sure what you're talking about," he said, forcing a weak laugh. "You may be misinterpreting a classified context." But Crockett didn't back down. "I'm not misinterpreting anything. I have the metadata, the recipients, and the full thread. It's not classified. It's damning." Mike Pompeo's confident posture collapsed ever so slightly. He reached for his water but missed the glass on the first attempt, drawing a brief, awkward glance from the host. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She leaned in further, placing the printed email squarely on the table. "Let me read a line for you, since you seem unsure," she said coolly. She cleared her throat and began, "We'll need to keep this off the main books. If the media catches wind, we'll have another Benghazi situation on our hands." The words echoed through the studio like a courtroom gavel. Gasps. Then silence. Then, the host cut in, nervously, "Congresswoman Crockett, are you alleging that Mr. Pompeo misused government channels for undisclosed foreign activity?" Crockett nodded. "Not alleging. I'm showing. This email is just one of 7. All sent during a critical window before a major vote on foreign funding, and all concealed from official State Department logs." Pompeo attempted to regain control. "This is a political stunt. You're taking things out of context, and you know it." But Crockett was already one step ahead. "Context?" she shot back. "Then explain why your chief of staff replied to this thread saying, 'We'll scrub the logs after the transfer. Just make sure it's done by Friday.'" The studio was dead quiet. Even the control room, watching through glass, had stopped moving. Pompeo's face had lost its usual color. The host turned to him. "Secretary Pompeo, is that your chief of staff's response?" He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Pompeo stared blankly at the paper in front of him. His mouth opened, then shut again. The seconds dragged. Jasmine Crockett folded her hands calmly, waiting. "I'm not here to play games," she said. "This isn't political theater, this is accountability. Americans deserve to know where their tax dollars went and who authorized backdoor operations without oversight." The host tried to diffuse the tension. "Congresswoman, are you suggesting criminal activity?" Crockett didn't blink. "I'm saying the content of these emails raises serious legal questions, and I've already forwarded them to the House Oversight Committee. But since Mr. Pompeo is so fond of public appearances, I figured I'd give him a chance to explain himself first." Pompeo finally spoke, voice shaky. "These emails were cherry-picked. Misrepresented. I'd have to consult with my legal team before responding." Crockett raised an eyebrow. "You'll have time for that. But just so we're clear, this isn't the only leak." She reached into her folder again. Another page. This time, it had a redacted line with a subject header that read, green light for Operation Sable, confirmed off record. "You really thought this wouldn't come out?" she asked, looking him dead in the eyes. "We warned you to stop hiding behind classified walls while moving taxpayer money like it was Monopoly cash." Pompeo sat frozen, lips tightly pressed. The host blinked hard. "We're going to go to a break." But the damage had already been done. The moment cameras cut to commercial, the studio descended into organized chaos. Producers scrambled behind the scenes. Assistants whispered urgently into earpieces. But the loudest silence still came from Mike Pompeo, who hadn't moved an inch since Crockett dropped that second email. He looked like a man who'd just seen the floor vanish beneath him. Jasmine Crockett, by contrast, calmly sipped water. Her phone buzzed, 3 missed calls from reporters, 2 from Capitol Hill aides, and 1 from someone she didn't recognize. She ignored them all. Across the table, Pompeo's voice broke the silence. "You have no idea what you're messing with," he said lowly. Crockett leaned in. "I know exactly what I'm messing with, corruption wrapped in patriotism." He narrowed his eyes. "You think this ends with you looking like a hero?" She smiled. "No. I think it ends with you looking like what you really are." Before he could respond, the countdown began, 5 seconds till we're back live. 4. 3, Crockett turned toward the camera. Pompeo straightened his tie, though his hand was visibly trembling. "We're back." The host spoke cautiously. Before the break, Representative Crockett presented emails that appear to implicate Secretary Pompeo in unauthorized foreign dealings. "Secretary Pompeo, would you like to respond on record?" A long pause. Then, Pompeo muttered, "I'd like to invoke my right to remain silent on matters under legal review." Gasps rippled through the panel. Even the host looked stunned. Crockett didn't say a word. She just stared forward, the picture of control, while Mike Pompeo quietly, publicly, unraveled. The clip went viral within minutes. By the time the segment ended, hashtags like #Pompeo emails and #Crockett exposed it were trending worldwide. The full exchange was already being dissected by legal analysts, former intelligence officers, and late-night comedians alike. Backstage, Pompeo's team tried to whisk him out a side exit, avoiding reporters already swarming the building. His press secretary barked into a phone, demanding statements be prepared. But there was no spin strong enough to undo what just happened, not when the footage was already being looped on every major network. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett exited the studio calmly, her phone now exploding with support. Senators. Journalists. Whistleblowers. One message stood out: "I have more documents. I've been waiting for someone to actually do something. Can we talk?" She smiled. The dam had cracked. By the time she returned to her office on the Hill, reporters were camped outside, and C-SPAN had already scheduled a special hearing for the following week. But Crockett wasn't just basking in the moment, she was planning her next move. Because this wasn't about one email. It was about an entire network. And Mike Pompeo? He was just the first domino. The next morning, Washington was on fire, metaphorically. Front pages splashed screenshots of the emails. News banners read, "Pompeo stunned into silence," and "Crockett's bombshell exposes secret channels." The Capitol buzzed with speculation. Even members of Pompeo's own party were demanding answers. But Jasmine Crockett wasn't done. At 9 a.m. sharp, she stepped into the Oversight Committee's chamber holding a sleek black folder. Reporters snapped photos as she walked past, her expression focused and unreadable. Inside, her staff waited, already reviewing corroborating documents sent overnight by a former State Department analyst. The new evidence. Detailed financial trails tied to offshore accounts, and a name she didn't expect to see, a private contractor tied to multiple undeclared intelligence operations. At noon, Crockett held a press briefing. Standing at the podium, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Yesterday, I revealed a pattern of off-record dealings orchestrated under Secretary Pompeo's watch, she said. Today, I'm submitting a formal request for a Department of Justice investigation. Reporters erupted in questions. Congresswoman, are you accusing Pompeo of funneling funds illegally? Do you believe this implicates others from the Trump administration? Have there been threats against you? She answered calmly, I believe the truth is unfolding. And I also believe this goes beyond one man. Which is why I won't stop until every piece of this puzzle is exposed. The briefing ended. The storm intensified. And in a quiet office across D.C., Mike Pompeo sat with his legal team, phone in hand, watching the press conference on mute, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the screen. The legal firestorm had officially begun. That evening, the Department of Justice released a brief but explosive statement. In light of newly surfaced documents related to unauthorized foreign operations, the DOJ will open a preliminary inquiry into the conduct of former Secretary Mike Pompeo during his tenure at the State Department. The media couldn't keep up. Interviews, special panels, emergency podcasts, all dissecting how a single email had triggered a national reckoning. And Jasmine Crockett? She was already preparing for the next stage. In a closed-door meeting with key House allies, she outlined a roadmap, subpoenas, testimony, and coordination with whistleblowers now stepping forward by the hour. One congressman leaned in. Do you think this could actually lead to criminal charges? Crockett looked him dead in the eye. If even half of what we're seeing is verified, he won't just lose credibility, he'll lose freedom. Meanwhile, Pompeo's world shrank by the second. Former allies were distancing themselves. His scheduled speech at a conservative conference was suddenly postponed. And late that night, a news leak revealed that one of his former aides had agreed to testify under oath, anonymously, for now. The walls were closing in. And the woman standing at the center of it all? She was just getting started. By the time Congress reconvened the following Monday, the atmosphere was electric. Security was heightened. Protesters and supporters alike lined the streets outside the Capitol. News vans circled like hawks. And inside, the Oversight Committee chamber was packed, standing room only. Jasmine Crockett entered with the same calm poise as always, flanked by staff carrying binders and sealed folders. But it was what she held in her hand that caught every camera lens in the room, a flash drive labeled, Sable, Unredacted. As she took her seat, the chairman banged the gavel. This hearing will come to order. Across the room, legal counsel representing Mike Pompeo sat stone-faced, already objecting to certain evidence being entered into the record. But Crockett didn't wait. I move to admit Exhibit C, she said, sliding the flash drive forward. This includes a full copy of the email thread in question, GPS-tagged file transfers, and internal messages referencing wire instructions tied to foreign accounts. All of it cross-verified. The room gasped as the monitors lit up. Dozens of emails scrolled across the screens, not just Pompeo's, but from contractors, aides, and intermediaries. One chilling line stood out in bold, "We'll use the third-party group in Jordan. Tell the secretary it's already greased." Committee members stared in stunned silence. Pompeo's lawyer stood up. Objection. This is speculative, incomplete, and lacks chain of custody, Crockett cut in without raising her voice. Chain of custody is intact. These files were provided by an internal whistleblower who signed a sworn affidavit. If Mr. Pompeo disagrees, he's welcome to testify under oath. A hush fell over the room. The chairman turned to the defense table. Will the former secretary be testifying today? His lawyer whispered something quickly. No, the counsel said. He's declining at this time. Crockett raised one brow and leaned into her mic. Of course he is. The silence after Crockett's words was deafening. Cameras zoomed in on Pompeo's empty seat. The image of that vacant chair would soon dominate headlines, a symbol of power ducking accountability. The committee pressed forward. Crockett methodically walked the chamber through a digital map now displayed on the screens, a money trail. Foreign wire transfers. Off-book security contracts. Shell corporations. Each glowing red dot tied back to one name, Mike Pompeo. Then she dropped the final bomb of the day. "I'd like to enter into the record a voicemail," she said, holding up a phone linked to the committee's audio system. This was provided by the same whistleblower, time-stamped 3 days after the email titled, "Greenlight for Operation Sable." She pressed play. "We can't afford this leaking. If she finds the rest of the thread, we're screwed. Delete the drive, now." The room was still. No name was spoken on the recording, but the voice was unmistakable to those who had worked with Pompeo. You could see it in their faces. A senior committee member leaned into his mic. "Congresswoman Crockett, do you believe this voicemail is authentic?" "Yes," she said. "And voice recognition software confirms a 97% match to Secretary Pompeo." Reporters in the back frantically typed. One shouted, "Will charges be filed?" Crockett didn't answer that directly. She simply turned to the chairman and said, "I move to refer this case to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation and recommend a formal subpoena for former Secretary Pompeo's testimony." The gavel slammed. Motion recorded. As the session adjourned, Crockett stood and calmly gathered her things. Behind her, the weight of a government scandal began to shift. Slowly, but undeniably, outside the Capitol, the scene was chaos. Journalists flooded the steps. Microphones lunged forward. Reporters shouted questions that echoed off the marble walls. "Congresswoman Crockett, do you believe Mike Pompeo committed a felony? Is this the biggest national security leak since Snowden? Have you received threats since releasing the email?" Jasmine Crockett paused at the top of the stairs, her team urging her to keep moving, but she turned around. Facing the crowd, she spoke clearly, her voice steady and unwavering. "I didn't come to Congress to play politics. I came to protect the truth. If that makes powerful people nervous, so be it. I'm not backing down." The crowd erupted. Flashes popped. Her words were instantly quoted in headlines from coast to coast. Across the city, Pompeo sat in a private law office, TV muted, staring at the image of Jasmine Crockett on every major network. His legal team argued back and forth about options, damage control, immunity deals, resignations from boards, deleting accounts. But nothing was working. And then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. No caller ID. He hesitated, then answered. A cold voice on the other end said, "You brought this on yourself. And she's not going to stop." Click. Back at Crockett's office, her staff reviewed a new folder that had arrived anonymously, documents with signatures, wire receipts, and names they hadn't seen before. She looked over the top page. Her eyes narrowed. "This goes deeper," she murmured. Because while the public thought Pompeo was the scandal, Jasmine Crockett just realized he might have only been the cover. The envelope was thick. Inside were printed receipts, encrypted transfer records, and one typed list of names, former officials, contractors, and what appeared to be foreign operatives. Some were already known. But a few had never been linked to any operation publicly. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly, piecing it together with her chief of staff. "This isn't just about Pompeo," her aide said, voice low. "These accounts, some trace back to Ukraine, a few to private banks in Dubai, and one, look at this, listed under a fake NGO operating in Venezuela." Crockett's fingers tapped the table. Harder with each second. "They weren't just bypassing Congress," she muttered. "They built a parallel network." That night, she made a secure call to a trusted contact in federal law enforcement. "I need a forensic team to verify a set of financial records, off the books. And I need it fast." "Are you saying there's more?" the agent asked. "I'm saying we haven't even scratched the surface," she replied. Meanwhile, in a luxury townhouse across town, Pompeo met with two shadowy figures, former intelligence veterans who hadn't appeared in public for years. They weren't lawyers. They were fixers. One of them lit a cigar and said bluntly, "She's not scared." "You underestimated that." Pompeo didn't answer. He simply poured a glass of scotch with a trembling hand. Back in Crockett's office, the final page of the anonymous folder showed a scanned passport. A real name and a fake identity used to funnel millions. And the signature approving it wasn't Pompeo's. It belonged to someone higher. Someone who hadn't yet been mentioned once in the news. Jasmine looked up from the page. "We've been aiming too low." The name on that passport sent chills through Jasmine Crockett's spine. A former vice chair of the National Security Council. Someone still seen on Sunday talk shows as a foreign policy expert. A man who shook hands with presidents, and quietly signed off on covert slush funds that never touched a single congressional ledger. This, she whispered, was never about Pompeo. He was the front. This is the architect. The next morning, Crockett walked into a classified intelligence briefing with senior members of Congress, armed with the full dossier, verified, time-stamped, cross-referenced. There was no grandstanding. No cameras. Just lawmakers, intelligence officers, and a truth too big to spin. She laid it out: secret funding routed through fake humanitarian orgs, shell companies laundering money for black ops, and at the center, a national figure still advising candidates for 2028. Silence filled the room. Then one senator leaned forward and said what everyone else was thinking: "If this gets out, we're talking about the biggest intelligence scandal since Iran-Contra." Crockett replied, calm but fierce, "It's already out. You just haven't seen the fallout yet." Within 24 hours, a sealed federal investigation was authorized. Witness protection requests surged. And major news outlets caught wind of a second wave of leaks about to drop, deeper, darker, and damning beyond Pompeo. As for Mike Pompeo, he'd gone silent. His last public appearance was a vague statement about misinformation, but it barely made a dent. He was no longer the focus. He was now just a loose thread, one of many. And Jasmine Crockett? She stood on the Capitol steps 2 days later, reporters swarming around her. One asked, "Congresswoman, where does this end?" She looked directly into the cameras, fire behind her eyes. "When we've dug up every last root," she said. "And the people responsible are no longer hiding behind flags." Then she turned, walked back inside, and closed the door behind her, already preparing for the next hearing. Because the truth wasn't just inconvenient now, it was radioactive.